Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 7 of the Tech Talk HR Functional Series. Today's topic is benefits management. My name is Heather, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your email, name, and/or address and phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have any questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. We have a subject matter expert standing by to answer your questions, and we will have time at the end for further questions. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Rachel Profitt, Senior Fast Track Solution Architect. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. We are super excited for this last Tech Talk in our series for implementing Dynamics 365 Human Resources. And like Heather said, today's topic is all focused around benefits management. Just one quick housekeeping item. We are going to be presenting today. All the content, all of the demonstrations, screenshots, and so on are based on the preview release of 10.0.26. Which is on the new merged infrastructure on the finance and operations applications infrastructure. So with that, I am going to get started with some quick introductions. Again, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Rachel Profitt. I am a Senior Fast Track Solution Architect based out of the Americas team. I do have my contact information here on the screen. I do invite you to follow me on Twitter, check out my YouTube at Dynamics 365 Unboxed, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow my blog at dynamics365lady.com. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the objectives for today's Tech Talk. We're going to start out by reviewing the process maps for the benefit management and related processes. This is similar to the process maps that we've taken a look at with all of our other Tech Talks in the series. And then we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the different types of benefits and configurations that are related to setting up benefits management. We'll also be describing the employee self-service benefits open enrollment process and describing how you can process life events. We'll wrap it up today with our do's and don'ts and a checklist, just as we always do. And a few things that we will not be covering in today's session include the detailed aspects of integrations, licensing considerations, or the legacy benefits module and configuration. Again, all of our topics today are based on the new benefits management module. So with that, let's go ahead and dive right in and take a look at our benefits process map. To get started today, we're going to review the process map for benefits management. Like our past process maps, we've broken the map down into 4 main groups for security, business processes and configurations, as well as administrative tasks, including data management and integrations. Let's start by looking at security roles. First, we have the standard roles for Human Resources Manager and Human Resources Assistant, which give access to large portions of the core human resources functionality. There's also the Compensation and Benefits Manager role, which can be used to view and update compensation and benefits, and also run the compensation processing jobs and update them if approved. It should be noted that Compensation and Benefits Manager roles is a centralized role, and as such is not restricted to managers' reporting or line hierarchies. There is also a role for Payroll Manager or Administrator. This gives specific access areas to things around payroll administration will have benefits set up access, whereas the Payroll Manager role is more of an approval role with view capabilities, including benefits and compensation and all payroll-related worker information. And as always, you can create your own custom roles to meet your business needs. We do generally recommend that you duplicate the existing roles if you want to make changes rather than editing security roles directly. Now, breaking down our processes, when we look at the areas we've broken down for the business processes and configurations, we've broken it down into 4 sections for benefits, flex credits, life events, and open enrollment. As always, there are parameters that are shared across all functions that are specific to each of these areas in benefits management. Moving on to the business processes and configurations, let's first look at benefits. To remain competitive, a company must offer a rich set of benefits to attract and retain the best employees. In addition to standard benefits like medical and dental coverage, companies might also want to offer expanded benefits like adoption assistance, recreation programs, or clothing allowances, just as a few examples. Benefits configuration allows a great amount of flexibility to build out different types of benefits, from the plans themselves to their specific configurations, such as bundles and programs. With easy-to-use processes that check employee eligibility for benefits, and to simplify complex processes such as rate changes. Dynamics 365 Human Resources also allows companies to use flex credit programs to enroll employees in benefits according to a predetermined number of flex credits. Employees can choose how they want to allocate their own allocated flex credits. For example, if an employee is covered under their spouse's health insurance plan, that employee may want to use their credits that they would have otherwise used on health coverage toward other benefits that your organization offers. During the employee lifecycle, in Dynamics 365 Human Resources, each employee may encounter various life event changes. For example, marriage, change in employment, or dependent and beneficiary changes. To use life events, you must set up life event types and set up life event options for plan types. And before you can process life events, you must already have run the open enrollment at least once during a hiring timeframe. A worker does not need to select a benefit plan in order for life events to be processed, but they need to have been included in open enrollment processing. You can use life event processing when you have workers who have life events that take place on a future date. This event will process all life events that have not been processed, like future life events, or life events that have been added that are not specific to any one worker. For example, a new benefit. There is also open enrollment as part of the employee self-service workspace. Here, employees can view their benefits and update them, select new benefits, and maintain and create contacts such as dependents and beneficiaries for the various benefits that your organization offers. Now, moving down to the administrative area. First, let's talk about data management. In the data management area, there are numerous entities that are available for benefits management. While this is not a comprehensive list of all of the entities, it is a good place to get you started with importing, exporting, or integrating your data with external systems. It is important to note that there is a benefits management template that lists the setup entities in the proper sequence for importing and exporting. This can greatly improve the time it takes to manage benefit data when moving between environments. This brings us to integrations. As with all other Dynamics 365 applications, there are numerous technologies that are available for integration. And depending on your business requirements, you'll need to select the best approach. To round out the process map, there is an administration section of benefits. These options are used to set up and maintain all the benefit offerings for your organizations. And some of these settings cross different modules and features. Now that we've taken a quick look at the benefits process map, let's take a look at some core benefits configuration. When preparing your system for using the benefits management module, there are a few core configurations that need to be thought through. Here, we're showing the Benefits Management Parameters tab in the Human Resources Shared Parameters page. Let's start by talking about benefits annual salary. Some benefits use a person's salary to calculate the amount of coverage they are entitled to. A typical scenario is life insurance, where a person may be covered for 1 or 2 times their annual salary. In some scenarios where an employee has a low salary and the company wants to be able to specify a different level for this type of compensation to be calculated against, the benefits annual salary option can be enabled. For example, let's imagine you have some salespeople and they may have a low base salary, but a high bonus or commission entitlements. Instead of calculating the life insurance coverage amount based on their base salary, by enabling this option, the employer can specify the amount to be used for that specific worker. An example of setting this up will be shown later. If enabled, when the system calculates that coverage, it will first look to see if benefits annual salary is set up for the employee plan. If not, it will go to the fixed compensation amount for the employee. And if neither have been populated, an error saying no compensation setup has been found will be displayed. All right. Now, let's take a look at the new hire eligibility and new hire enrollment period fields. Some benefit plans might have eligibility rules driven by a date, for example, a hire date. In these scenarios, if the company would like to have one overarching defined period where an employee is considered a new hire, you can enable this new hire eligible option and then enter a value into the new hire enrollment period field. This overrides any new hire enrollment period that has been set up on the plan eligibility rule. For example, if an employee was hired on the 1st of August, and the new hire enrollment period is set to 30, an employee can join new hire plans for the next 30 days or until August 30th. Next, we have the default pay frequency. There are 3 values that need to be entered on an employee prior to that worker or employee being able to enroll in a benefit. We'll look at these in more detail in the next slide, but for now, one of them is the pay frequency. By entering in a default pay frequency, this value will default through to new workers when you hire that employee. If your organization and your employees are paid on different pay frequencies, you'll likely want to consider leaving this value blank and then specifying the default pay frequency on each individual worker when you hire that employee. Lastly, let's take a quick look at the life events enabled option. When you enable this flag, the company allows life events processing within the benefits management module. We'll discuss life events in more detail later on. There are 3 pieces of information that are required to enable employees to enroll in benefits, and we're going to take a look at each of them. Here I'm on the worker, and I'm going to click to the Positions tab. There are 2 scenarios to briefly discuss. The first is existing employees. In order for a current employee to be able to enroll in a benefit, they must have a valid position for that period. For example, if it's September, and you've opened enrollment for the next period starting in January, the system looks at the position of the employee as of January. The next scenario is for a new hire. The system will look at the hire date and see if there is a position at that date. If not, the position date will need to be set back to the hire date because the system can't drive benefit plans without a date. Next is the salary. So we're going to click up to compensation and click on fixed compensation plan. As discussed earlier, a salary or fixed compensation amount is needed as some benefits, such as life insurance, use an employee's salary to drive a coverage amount. For example, 1 or 2 times of an employee's salary amount. Closing this and going back, let's take a look at the pay frequency. So we're going to scroll down on the position details. And when we get down into the payroll tab, here you can see the pay cycle. When I click on this, it opens up and you can see the details. The pay cycle or pay frequency is used to drive the cost of the benefit for the employee based on how often they get paid, and it also drives how it's viewed in employee self-service. Imagine a cell phone plan, and the cost to the cell phone provider is paid once per month. Let's say $50, and let's say the employer is reimbursing that cost to the employee. Now, if the employee is paid fortnightly, when they go into employee self-service, they will see the cost of that coverage in their pay frequency is $25. Prior to enrolling an employee into a benefit, there are some configurations that need to be set up on the employee record. Some benefits require that the personal contacts of an employee are set up before they can be selected. Specifically, those benefits or benefits that have a coverage option that requires either a beneficiary or a dependent. For example, a benefit such as dental or medical may have a coverage option that allows an employee to add a dependent, such as a child, who will be covered by the plan. Another benefit, such as life insurance, may require a beneficiary, someone who receives a payout from the plan, even though they're not covered by the plan. These can be set up and maintained by the employee in employee self-service. When an employee goes into employee self-service, the system will look to see if the necessary personal contacts have been set up. If not, the employee can specify that a personal contact is a beneficiary or a dependent when they're creating them. This setup is also very important for benefits that have the mandatory flag selected. We'll talk more about the mandatory flag shortly. However, if the plan requires a dependent or beneficiary, it will not be selected by default unless these have been pre-configured. While we're talking about important configurations on the employee, I'd like to take this time to highlight the eligibility date. It's found underneath work history and then clicking over to the benefit details tab. We'll look at eligibility rules a little later on, and some of the rules are driven by a date, for example, 30 days after the hire date. However, if you need to override that eligibility rule for an employee, you can specify an eligibility date here, and this date will override all eligibility date-driven rules. Now that we've had a look at the core benefits configuration, let's switch gears and take a look at the setup and configuration for creating benefit plans. I want to start by sharing a brief overview of coverage options, as they're referred to later in this Tech Talk. Coverage options in Dynamics 365 Human Resources are the amounts of coverage that an employee can potentially select from or who is being covered when you're choosing to enroll in a specific benefit plan or program. For example, if an employer were to offer a medical benefit, they could create coverage options for employee, employee plus one, or employee plus family. That is the who that is being covered in that example. At the same time, you can specify the eligibility criteria that are appropriate. For example, employee plus one might only be allowed for a dependent, which is a pre-configured as a personal contact by the employee that's under the age of 21. In the case of other benefits, such as life insurance, the coverage might refer to the amount that is covered, and this amount might be associated with an employee's salary. Therefore, coverage options could be set up for a multiple of the employee's salary, for example, 2 times salary or 3 times salary. Once defined, you can reuse benefit coverage options with multiple benefits. You can associate an option with one or more plans. Now let's talk about plan types. A plan type is a high-level grouping of specific types of benefits. When you create or edit a plan type, you can specify which coverage options are applicable. For example, the medical and dental plans could have employee only, employee plus one, and employee plus family. Whereas the plan for plan types such as fitness or gym membership, a more applicable coverage amount might just be a flat amount, as it may just be a set amount that's given each month. Each plan type has a plan type code. These are hard-coded into the system, and these plan type codes determine rules for the plan type. When we look at the benefit plans, we will see more closely how plan type codes affect the options or configurations that are available. The contact type, where you can select dependent or beneficiary in the drop-down box, also drives what configuration is required for when you select that plan. For example, if the plan type requires a beneficiary, the employee will need to have at least one personal contact set up and configured as a beneficiary. And there will also need to be a beneficiary associated with that plan for it to be selected. The next setting I want to talk about is the concurrent enrollment. Concurrent enrollment drop-down box determines if an employee can enroll in multiple plans of the same plan type or if they can only enroll once. So, for example, if we were to create a medical plan type and set concurrent enrollment to one enrollment per type, an employee would only be allowed to enroll in one medical plan type benefit. However, there could be another plan type, let's say retirement, and that might be set up as multiple enrollments per type, as they might be based on employee contributions rather than company contributions, and thus they can have multiple plan benefits, and the employee would have the option to enroll in multiple benefits of the same type. Now, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about eligibility rules. Eligibility rules are set up and then linked to a benefit to determine who is eligible for a specific benefit. There is a great deal of flexibility in eligibility rules. Therefore, it is recommended that care is taken when configuring them. With the additional criteria tab, there are filters that allow a company to be very specific about the criteria for that eligibility rule. For example, eligible job could be used to ensure only employees with a specific role can have a specific benefit. For example, a company may decide that as part of an executive package, only people in senior leadership roles are entitled to specific benefits. Another example is eligible age. One important item to note is that options that you create in this list act as an or operation, not an and operation. Therefore, at this time, there is no age range capability. In the example shown here, an associated benefit plan would be eligible for any employee who is greater than or equal to 21 years of age or less than or equal to 65. Thus, everyone would be eligible based on age alone. Due to the flexibility of eligibility rules, there is an enrollment eligibility process, which can be run. And this process will give detailed results per employee and benefit plan on their eligibility or not. And if not, information on why they failed that eligibility rule is displayed. It's worth noting that there is an eligibility rule override as well. Therefore, If a specific employee isn't eligible for a plan based on the rules you've defined, however, they need to be enrolled and you need to make an exception, these eligibility rules can be overridden manually on the worker. There are a variety of different eligibility criteria. It's recommended that you have a read through all of the different options available so that you can be familiar with the available options. One call out I want to make is the last line, and that is custom eligibility rules. In Dynamics 365 Human Resources, you can create custom fields to track additional information. Custom fields can be used in the eligibility process, and these rules can use one or more custom fields to determine the eligibility of an employee. You can add custom fields to either an existing rule or you can create entirely new eligibility rules. Now, let's start talking about setting up the benefit plans for the employees. When benefit plans are created, there are some important configurations that need to be considered. So we'll go through the main ones now. A program can be thought of as a package of benefits that are going to have a specific set of eligibility rules associated with them. An organization might decide to create an executive package, for example. And in this package, the executives get a car allowance and a cell phone. The program field allows for a logical grouping of these benefits and the ability to set eligibility rules associated to all the plans in the group. In this scenario, you might specify that the eligibility rule is driven by a job type. If you recall, when I was talking about the plan type codes driving configurations, here you'll notice that when we change to look at a medical HD benefit plan, which has another plan type code, the configuration options at the bottom of the screen change. So here's the Med HD, and now the configuration options are different. Now you have the option of COBRA and or HIPAA. A bundle allows a company to force a relationship between two or more benefit plans. This relationship means that a user must select the master benefit prior to being able to select other benefits that are in that same bundle. Let's take medical, for example. Medical HD or high deductible is the master, and an HSA or healthcare spending account is part of the same bundle. But prior to an employee being able to select the HSA option or benefit, they must select the medical high deductible or HD. The master toggle switch just below the bundle field indicates that the plan is the master plan within the bundle that it is assigned to. In the Setup tab, we have several important toggles. So let's review a few of these key options. First is the Allow Continue Enrollment option. This specifies whether employees can enroll in the plan if they meet eligibility requirements. If this is set to No, the plan won't be available to employees when you process eligibility. Therefore, it's usually set to Yes. Next is the Auto Enroll from prior year option. This specifies whether to automatically enroll an eligible employee in the plan they were enrolled in during the prior year. You can also select the option to auto-enroll by default. This is used to specify whether to select the plan for enrollment by default. If the plan is not mandatory, the employee can change the default selection. In other words, when the employee goes to their cart, they'll see it as selected by default and can then choose to enroll or remove it. For example, a company may choose this if a benefit is paid for by the company. Next, we have the Closed for New Enrollments option, which indicates that only employees that are already enrolled can continue to be enrolled. In other words, no new employees can be added. This may be used when grandfathering a benefit, for example. The last option we want to review is the mandatory plan option. This is used to specify whether to automatically enroll employees in the plan. Employees cannot change the enrollment selection when it's marked as mandatory. It's worth mentioning that this only works smoothly if default designees such as beneficiaries and/or dependents are set up on the employee personal contacts. For example, if a dependent is required for a plan, this needs to be set up. Otherwise, even if it's marked as mandatory and they don't have default beneficiaries or dependents set up, the system won't automatically add and configure them. Thus, the employee still needs to select the designee. Now, let's talk about eligibility rules. Oops. Sorry. Other items to take care of include ensuring that the appropriate eligibility rules have been added to the plan. Also, you'll want to ensure that there is a valid period. If a valid period hasn't been set up, employees won't be able to enroll in the plan. It's also necessary to take a look at the attached coverage options on the plan. Previously, when we set up coverage options, we covered some examples such as employee only, employee plus one, and employee plus family. These coverage options can then be added to the plan, and with each of these coverage options, you can specify the rate and the deduction. Rate can be used to distinguish how much different plans with different coverage options cost. For example, a medical plan with a coverage option of employee only will be less expensive than employee plus family. Other nuances can be configured, such as rates for a smoker versus a non-smoker. It's also important to note that if an employee is transferred to another legal entity, their benefits are not copied. Now that we've had a look at how to set up all the configurations and benefit plans, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about life events. Life events are events that occur in an employee's life that could affect their eligibility for benefits. Common examples are getting married, having children, moving, and so on. The eligibility for plans or coverage options for those plans are dependent on this information. Life events occur and are tracked in benefits management. Benefit administrators can then process those life events. And finally, employees can make these selections of benefit plans and coverage options. So let's take a quick look at a demonstration of this functionality. In this demonstration, I'll show you how you can enable life events and process those life events. Let's get started by navigating into the Human Resources Shared Parameters page. I've started by opening the Benefits Management workspace. Then I'll click Links and select Human Resources Parameter Shared Parameters page. Once the Human Resources Shared Parameter page opens up, I'm going to click over to the Benefits tab, Benefits Management tab, I should say. It's on the left towards the bottom. And here you can see that Life Events Enabled is already selected. I'll close this page down, and now let's take a look at the Life Event Types page. Once the Life Event Types page opens up, I'm going to scroll down, and for our example, we'll take a look at the marital status. Here you can see that the life event type is set to marital status change. This is a specific trigger, and in this example, it gets triggered when the marital status field changes on a worker. If we click on the attached plans, you can see the plans that are attached to this particular type. In that example, it was just the dental plan. So now let's take a look at Julia Funderburg's worker record, and we'll change her status to separated. It's currently married, and we've changed it to separated. Next, when you click Save, you'll notice that you receive a message that a marital status life event was created for the period. Now, we need to run the life event processing job. So I'll close this and go back and click Life Event Processing. I'll select the enrollment period. And for this example, I'll select 2022. In the life event date, I'll use March 31st. I'll select my legal entity, in this case, USMF. And for my example, I'm going to select a specific worker for Julia that I just updated. In normal situations, in broad examples, you would likely leave this blank and set it up as a batch job. So after you've selected the worker, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set this up as a batch job by clicking Batch Processing and then selecting Recurrence. I'll select some options here for daily and then click OK and click OK again. Again, in real life, you likely wouldn't do this for one specific worker, but if you're running it as a broad job, you might want to set that up as a recurrence. Now we can go look at the results. So I'm going to click back to the Summary tab in my workspace and click on Active Life Events. You can see I've got 10 active life events, and I'll open it up and scroll down to the bottom. And here you can see my record for Julia Funderburk with that marital status change that happened on 3/30. Now you've seen the process of how to create and process life events in Dynamics 365 Human Resources. Next, we're going to switch gears a little bit and touch upon integrations. There are a lot of different integration options, and as we've discussed in previous Tech Talks, you need to understand the scope of the required integration so that you can select the best pattern for your particular integration. One important approach to integration revolves around leveraging the Dataverse. There are various tables within the Dataverse that are there to support benefits. The Dataverse also provides full create, read, update, and delete, or CRUD operations using virtual entities in the Dataverse. The data for virtual entities isn't actually stored directly in the Dataverse, but in the application database. In this case, it would be the Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations app database. We are targeting to have dual write coverage of benefits in the 10.0.28 release of the system. However, unless the data needs to reside in the Dataverse for a specific purpose, such as executing business logic directly in the Dataverse, we recommend that you consider using virtual entities instead. And of course, there is the Data Management Framework, or DMF. DMF entities currently provide the most complete data coverage for your human resources benefits management data. But it's important to note that DMF isn't appropriate for real-time integrations, such as when you need immediate user feedback in a user interface. However, DMF is likely the best option when you have high throughput that is required, such as a nightly or weekly scheduled input, port, or export of many hundreds or thousands of records. Okay. Now that we've talked briefly about integrations, I want to switch gears and talk about the various batch processes that are used with benefits management. The first job I want to talk about is the enrollment eligibility processing job that we've discussed earlier in this Tech Talk. This job is designed to identify which employees are eligible for which benefits. And more importantly, when an employee is not eligible, it will identify the reason. We also took a look at the life event processing job earlier in this Tech Talk. This job is designed to process all life events that have not yet been processed, like future life events or life events that have been added that are not specific to any one worker. One example is adding a new benefit. Real-time life events are hidden. There's also a life event change processing job that is used specifically for processing two types of life events. That includes birthday changes and eligibility rule override expiration date changes. Next, we have the life event eligibility processing, which is similar to the enrollment eligibility processing job that we've discussed. However, it determines which life events workers are eligible for as opposed to benefit plans. And finally, there is the rate change update processing job. This job will process benefit rate changes in Dynamics 365 Human Resources when a new or existing benefit plan has a change in eligibility rule settings. If a new eligibility rule is created and assigned to the plan, this prompts the system to rerun worker eligibility to check if workers may now be eligible for the plan based on the new eligibility options. All right, now let's switch gears and talk about open enrollment in the employee self-service workspace. Here you can see a sample of the employee open enrollment page in the employee self-service workspace. Employees can select plans via employee self-service if they want to. And remember that for a title to appear on the employee self-service dashboard, you'll need to first navigate to Benefits Management Employee Self-Service Parameters. And at the bottom of the Setup Forms list in the Benefits Plan tile setup page, you'll configure which tiles you want to appear here in Employee Self-Service Open Enrollment. So when open enrollment occurs, or employees are newly hired, or if a life event occurs, employees can select or update their benefits via employee self-service. The self-service portal brings together a host of information for the user, such as vacation summaries, certifications, scheduled reviews, and performance goals, and so on, can all be monitored. In the case of benefits, the user can click through to the benefits self-service page to confirm which benefit plans they want to select and to designate their beneficiaries and dependents. From the self-service view, a user could click through to any attachments, such as a full plan explanation. For example, selecting the medical tile allows the user to then view an attachment and see a summary of the plan available for further review. The self-service approach provides an effective and consistent approach for all employees to review and manage their employee benefits. The benefit statement report is provided out of the box, and it's a statement or report that lists all of the benefits that the employee is currently enrolled in. The report can be accessed by an employee directly or by a benefits administrator. The benefit statement provides a list of the employee's enrolled benefits, coverage options, costs, and any enrolled dependents or beneficiaries. The statement can be printed for a single worker or for multiple workers. It's important to note that the benefit statement feature must be enabled in the feature management workspace, and you'll also need to ensure that the benefit management feature is enabled first before you can select the benefit statement feature. The benefit statement is part of the electronic reporting framework, and thus it's also important to note that the configuration providers and repositories will also need to be set up and configured in order to use this new report. The image that you see here on screen shows an example of this report. The report will display the plan, coverage option, employee cost, and employer cost. The report will also list any covered dependents if the plan has beneficiaries associated to it. The beneficiaries, along with their distribution priority and percentage, will also be displayed. This brings us to the do's and don'ts portion of our session. There are various do's that should be reviewed when you're setting up and configuring benefits management. One issue that employees sometimes encounter is that periods are not visible when navigating into employee self-service. Having no periods visible when navigating to employee self-service and selecting benefits self-service suggests that enrollment eligibility processing has not been run for the employee, or the employee is not actually eligible for any benefit plans. To check this, the HR administrator will need to run the enrollment eligibility processing and review the process results. After you run them, those results can be seen on the Process Results tab. This will show if an employee was eligible for a given benefit plan. And another item to note here is that you'll want to verify if the worker benefit plans for the employee, and look for the worker benefit plans under personal information and verify periods and plans. The worker benefit plans link will not be enabled until an employee has benefit plans that they are eligible for. The next consideration for your dues is around scheduling and processing the various benefit-related jobs according to your business requirements. You'll want to define the frequency that you're running these batch jobs, but you'll also want to consider the overall batch schedule that you've configured, especially in a combined finance and operations implementation. Again, and we discussed this earlier when we discussed integrations. We do recommend that you consider virtual entities for any new integrations that you're developing. We do suggest, and it's over in our don'ts, that you avoid using dual write unless the data is required in the Dataverse in order to execute business logic that was developed on the Dataverse. It's also important to note that we don't recommend you turn on the benefits management feature until you're ready, keeping in mind that once you enable that feature, it cannot be turned off, especially if you're using the old benefits module in your production environment. You'll want to very carefully plan your cutover process. The last two don'ts that we have are very similar. All around testing, we can't ever emphasize testing enough, but two specific things that we specifically recommend related to benefits are making sure that you test the employee self-service, including your benefits open enrollment experience, on all the types of devices that your workforce will be using when they process and run through the open enrollment process. We also recommend that you thoroughly test the security that's related to benefits and employee self-service when rolling out the benefits management module. That brings us to our checklist and resources. I'm not going to walk through each of these steps. However, it is important to note that this deck will be available with the TechTalk recording, and you can download that PowerPoint and use it as a checklist in your implementations. We have put all the steps that are required for setting up the benefits management functionality, and we recommend that you follow these steps in this sequence. And we've included a link over to the docs articles that have more information about how to set up and configure these various benefits management settings and processes. All right, so we've also pulled together 3 additional learning resources for you that we strongly recommend. We do recommend that you take the Create Benefits Plan in Human Resources learning path available out on the Learn site, as well as the Get Started with Human Resources learning path. It's also important to note that you'll need to procure and assign the correct licenses to your employees and workers in order to use the Dynamics 365 human resources functionality, and we've provided a link here with additional details about licensing. If you're new to Dynamics 365 human resources, we encourage you to get started today by signing up for a free trial. You can also learn about the fundamentals of human resources and get access to all of our human resources tech talks. Like I said, this is the 7th tech talk in our series. It's the last one in our series. And all of those recordings are available on the Tech Talks Dynamics community page. There's a link here on this slide to get to that. We also encourage you to check out the human resources documentation as another excellent resource that you can use to learn more about Dynamics 365 human resources. And with that, we are going to open it up for questions. We don't have any questions in the queue right now that have not been answered, but we did have several questions that came in throughout the presentation. So we'll go ahead and quickly review those. If you do have additional questions, please go ahead and get those entered into the Q&A panel. We do have the product team and others from our human resources P crew here to help answer those questions. So the first question that we had was, can we associate leave types with benefits? Example given, one parent with 2 children is entitled to more sick leave as than one parent with 1 child. The answer to that, it's not something that is currently supported within benefits management. We do suggest that you submit this to the ideas site and solicit votes from your peers and your colleagues so that it's something that we might be able to consider in a future release. And I believe, Sheila, we don't have anything around that on our roadmap. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
All right. So the next question we had is, can you verify for the age validation works for benefits? For example, if you have a life insurance plan that is age bracketed, does the plan automatically update to the new rate if they have a birthday mid-year, or does it trigger a life event, or is the age only calculated during open enrollment for the new year? And this is a great question. So thank you, Sheila, for answering that one too in the Q&A panel. The answer here is that you would want to use the birthday life event for the plans where individuals would age out of. Then you would execute the life event change processing batch job, probably once a month on a monthly batch basis. So in my example, when I was running that plan, I did a daily, but you would want to choose monthly, most likely. And then that is going to provide the eligibility on the age of the employee at the time the process is run against the eligibility rules on the plan. And Sheila did post a link out to that docs article that was in the PowerPoint slide there. So you can certainly take a look at that docs article to learn a little bit more about that specific process. That looks like all the questions that we had that came in. So with that, I am going to hand it back over to Heather to wrap us up today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I have posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. And we'd love your feedback on today's session and to hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I would love to extend a big thank you to our presenter, Rachel, today and our audience for joining us. Everyone, have a great rest of your day.